to me, and you know, I just can't help myself. I feel it. I feel the heat coming on. But first we need to check our audience, we need to check our people. Make sure everybody is who they say they are. Now, we're going to have to do a roll call. All right, is everybody listening? Everybody listening? We're going to do a roll call. And we do this all the time with Recovery Theater because we like to make sure that the playing field is level. Can you hear me? Okay, now, I don't want anybody to be afraid. We don't have any police officers in here that are here for you, but we need everybody to be honest. Now, are there any crackheads in here? In recovery or out? Anybody want to hold their hand up? Testify? Okay, I saw somebody. Anybody fooling around with the opiates? You having a problem? Okay. Any drinkers? Got any drinkers? We got some drinkers? Okay, there we go. There we go. We got any cigarette smokers? Got some cigarette smokers? Okay, I figured so. How about some coffee drinkers? Got some coffee drinkers. There you go. How about some pill poppers? Anybody on the pills? Okay, that's fine. Got any weed smokers? There we go. Oh yeah, that's my people right there. Do we have anybody that is hooked on the internet? Anybody hooked on shopping? Anybody hooked on sex? How about talking? How about not talking? Anybody hooked on anger? Anybody hooked on love? How about love? I got one for you. Anybody hooked on food? Oh, yeah, I figured that. That's all for it. But I think I know, you know where I'm going. It doesn't matter whether you held your hand up or not. Look to the left and look to the right, and you're in good company. All right? Everybody's here as one. I've got another young man I want to bring up for you. He's also one of San Francisco's treasures. He's known as the base of the baby. So put your hands together for Mr. Ben McCole.
Good evening, everybody. It's so nice to see the house all full. People here for information. And I'd like to share a couple of songs with you. Hopefully they will resonate. And lift your spirit. Mr. Osborne. I started in the church in Mississippi. And this is a song a little bit about who we are as a people. It's written by Oscar Brown Jr. To see clear through despair, the way we always done, and burdened with fear, and still find some love.
Is it showtime yet? Is it showtime? All right, let's get ready to rumble.
This is the beautiful tenderloin right here. Give it up for yourselves. Are we ready for a forum? Are we ready for a forum? All right, I got to do a little bit of housekeeping things and then we'll get things started. My name is Fernando. Thank you very much for joining us tonight at the Tenderloin Mayoral Forum. Quick housekeeping. Restrooms to the back. Check your volunteers. They'll find you the way. Please silence your cell phones. And should we have to leave in a hurry, everyone watch out for each other, be good to one another, and find the emergency exits there or the way you came in. Allow me to briefly thank our sponsors. Really, these things do not manifest themselves. First up, I got to give it up to the Central City SRO Collaborative who really set it up. And the tenant leaders who really made the call that the Tenderloin had to have a forum. There's a lot of forums out there, but there's only one for the Tenderloin. That's right. The St. Francis Foundation and the Tenderloin Health Improvement Partnership has invested a lot to make the Tenderloin a healthier place. Thank you so much for coming on board and joining us in this endeavor. My organization, the Tenderloin Community Benefit District, it is an honor every day to come to work and serve this neighborhood. I love you. I love Safe Passage as well. Give it up for them. That needs no introduction. They've done so much for the neighborhood, and they also lent us our moderator tonight, so we really appreciate you being with us every step of the way. And lastly, TNDC's Community Organizing Department. Is this not a beautiful space? Let's give it up for St. Boniface for hosting us tonight. Father Franklin, thank you very much. We would be remiss also not to mention the resource that St. Boniface offers every day to our homeless neighbors through the Gubbio Project. It is such a welcoming space to offer that sacred suite. To Marriott Academy for giving us access to the space and help us in all the planning. To Marriott, where you at? And I would also be remiss to not thank the candidates. Everyone is jawing at them for their time, and they look at the turnout that we got tonight. I don't know if there's been a forum that's had 6 candidates on the stage at one time. I'll get into our program in just a second, and then I'm going to pass it off. Should any of the candidates have to leave tonight, we've asked them to wait for a pause in someone's response and just simply leave the way that they came in. Again, we really appreciate them being here tonight. About the program. A lot of you probably have burning questions at the tip of your tongue that you'd love to shout out here. For the last 6 weeks, we have been gathering questions. We've talked to our homeless neighbors, we've talked to our property owners, our businesses, our residents, organizations, community groups. We gathered over 150 questions. We've whittled them down into categories and made 6 out of those, and maybe a few yes or no's in there as well. We're going to ask each candidate the same question. Before they arrive, we rolled the dice with 6 of them being up here. The number was 5, which landed at Leno. Leno would lead us off. It'll go to his left and continue down the line per question. So, everybody got that? Has been working in San Francisco nonprofits for over 18 years, including the San Francisco AIDS Foundation and Stop AIDS Project. He is currently the Senior Director of Programs at Glide. He carved some time out of his very, very busy schedule to prepare to be here tonight. Let's get the forum started. And please, thank your volunteers. They put in so much hard work to do this. A quick shout out to Mr. David Elliott Lewis and Clifford Gilmore.
Hi everybody. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you everybody for coming. What a great turnout. Sorry. Is that better? Okay, good. Thank you also to the candidates for coming. What a great turnout for an experiment in democracy. I'm just going to jump right in because we're starting a little bit late. So thank you all for coming. Tonight we want to talk about the Tenderloin. What a lot of people don't know about the Tenderloin is that there's a rich and vibrant community here to rival any neighborhood in the world. Tenderloin has pioneered globally recognized movements. All right. There we go. How's that? Sorry, I'm not really used to talking to microphones. The Tenderloin has pioneered globally recognized movements to advance human rights and is the birthplace of genre-defining musicians, artistic trailblazers, and social justice heroes. Per block, more children live in the Tenderloin than any other neighborhood in the city. And for decades, the Tenderloin has been a place where low-income and new immigrant communities have come to attempt to fulfill the iconic American dream. In the heart of San Francisco, the Tenderloin embodies the strong community values of acceptance, inclusion, resilience, creativity, and hope. As all of us also know, the Tenderloin is also home to the most complex and seemingly intractable issues facing San Francisco: chronic homelessness, housing insecurity, mental illness, substance use, and multi-generational poverty. In this city of great opportunity, it is the most vulnerable neighborhood. 1/3 of residents live below the federal poverty line and experience the city's highest rates of chronic disease and mental illness. For many, the Tenderloin sidewalks are home. More than half of San Francisco's homeless population live as neighbors without shelter in the Tenderloin, sleeping on the sidewalks and in doorways and alleys every night. In addition, many SRO hotel residents with limited alternatives for places to simply hang out congregate outside, with the sidewalks acting as neighborhood living rooms. The Tenderloin is also home to the largest open-air drug market in Northern California, and perhaps not surprisingly, the city's hottest criminal activity. It is also a place where unmet needs for mental health treatment and supportive housing mean that mentally ill residents roam freely at risk of harm to themselves and others. High concentrations of seniors, veterans, and other vulnerable populations reside here as well. Many unsafe and illegal behaviors are allowed to routinely take place on the Tenderloin streets, but not in other more affluent neighborhoods. Current city policies and practices institutionalize this status quo and make the city complicit in maintaining the Tenderloin as a containment zone. All of these challenges negatively impact residents who are already economically and socially disadvantaged and who face vast disparities in resources and opportunities to thrive when compared to residents of other neighborhoods in the city. We believe that the Tenderloin is the most important neighborhood to shape San Francisco's future because the Tenderloin is a microcosm of the entire city. All of the challenges that we see here are playing out across San Francisco, and if, as mayor, you can implement community-informed and innovative, evidence-based solutions to the core challenges we see in the Tenderloin, the rest of the city will follow with relative ease. So let's begin with questions. As we said, we're going to start with Mark Leno. So the number one barrier to public safety in the Tenderloin is the 24-hour open-air drug market that persists here. This neighborhood is a known transaction destination with people coming from all over the Bay Area to buy and sell drugs on a daily basis. The scope and scale of this trafficking is not supported by Tenderloin residents and wouldn't be tolerated in any other neighborhood. So our first question. In your first year as mayor, what specific steps will you take to dramatically decrease drug trafficking in the Tenderloin?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out tonight. This is really an extraordinary exercise in the democratic process. I want to thank all those who have brought us together. Just to say, my first 4 years in San Francisco were spent right here in the Tenderloin, 625 Hyde Street between Post and Geary, so I feel a real foot here as home for me. As mayor of San Francisco, I will be focusing specifically and initially on ending street homelessness by 2020. And that is an important step for us to take, because so much of what we see on the streets, whether it's the human waste or the syringes or all of the refuse, is a symptom, as is the drug dealing and other crime problems of homelessness. And if we are able to give folks a hand up and get folks off the street, we'll be dealing with a lot of the other problems simultaneously. So step one, we need to keep those who are in their homes, and that's why I amended the Ellis Act a few years back to exempt SROs from Ellis Act eviction, saving 12,000 of San Francisco's most vulnerably housed from eviction, and then taking steps to work diligently with all the property owners. The Department of Building Inspection, among others, has already opined that there are upwards of 1,500 available SROs right now. That's step one. I see my time's up. I'll talk more about the homeless plan as the evening goes on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Amy Farrah Weiss. I was born in Berkeley, raised in San Jose, and moved to San Francisco in 2007, but I've been coming here since I was a young person, also playing music in different places around the city, back when I was going to UC Santa Cruz and in a band. And so I know what the Tenderloin is like because I had played at Chemo's back at Poke and Pine, back in the day. And I know that these same issues that we're experiencing today are the same issues we've been experiencing for decades, right? And so before I came here tonight, I was actually asking people on the street, do you think that a new mayor coming in is going to actually make a difference on June 5th. And let's just be real, most people don't think that a new mayor is going to make a difference. But I'll tell you why I would make a difference. Because I have 20 years of experience working in direct service in mental health, harm reduction, transitional housing, leadership and development. So I know how to take an issue like end homelessness or work on the drug issue that's in San Francisco right now and actually heal it at the root. So I've been working the last 2.5 years on creating safe, organized spaces for people who are currently unsheltered. And Mark's absolutely right. We have to heal that at the root, and we're going to see a lot of difference after that. But in terms of the open-air drug dealing, let's make San Francisco known as a mindful consumption and equitable access epicenter for cannabis rather than hard drugs. That's something that I've been working on for a couple of years. And so let's go ahead and take some different approaches to this issue.
I'd like to remind the candidates that I know it's a short time, but you have 90 seconds to respond, and we'd like you to stay on time and stay on the TL, and please stay on the question. We're going this way. You start, please.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Angela Alioto. I have been in the Tenderloin for many years of my life. Started down here a long time ago before I was an elected official, working on homelessness and with Father Louis Vitale at the very early stages of the Gubbio project, and have been working with that ever since. Let me just say, this question is about drug dealers. It's not about homelessness. Drug dealers and homelessness, are two very separate issues. Homelessness is somebody, wait, and when you clap, as much as I love that you clap, I love it, but it takes away from my time, and they never give me enough time anyway. So let me go on about how near and dear to my heart, people who prey on homeless people. And the drug dealers are people who prey on the homeless people. The drug dealers need to be arrested. We need to get from the very bottom of the drug dealers to the top dog of the drug dealers who's putting out all of these drugs in our great city. This is an amazing community in the Tenderloin. Just imagine how wonderful it would be with the stopping of the drug dealing and with some medical aid for mental health, which by the way would be good all over the city. But this is a community of people that understand the soul of San Francisco. And so drug dealing is what we have to hit, not homelessness.
I grew up right down the street on Eddy and Laguna, and sadly, drug dealing was a way of life for many of the people that I grew up with. It could have easily been my path. And what is the difference is opportunity. Why am I standing here running for mayor while so many people that I grew up with haven't had that opportunity? Part of what we have to do as a city is, yes, invest in services, is, yes, make sure that we provide the opportunity. But the other thing is, we have to have a no-tolerance policy. My grandmother believed in tough love. When it came to doing the kinds of things, sadly, that my brother did that landed him in jail, Ms. Brown didn't tolerate that. And we have to make sure we have more police officers on our streets to crack down on what we know is destroying the quality of life of our neighborhoods. Part of how we also address the issue is making sure that the social service agencies that we provide funding to, that provide opportunities for people to get employment or to do something different besides what we know exists, are easier to access than sadly what we see happening on our streets every single day. As mayor, I will make sure that the services for the community are provided, and I will also make sure that we have more police officers out of their cars and on the street walking the beats to address those issues.
Good evening. My name is Richie Greenberg. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. I am glad that finally London Breed brought up the fact about the police. Now I know that this is not a popular issue, the subject here of the police, but we cannot have enforcement, we cannot enforce the laws without the police department. I hear hissing, but please understand that until London brought up the police, we talked about that we need to cut back, we can't have the drug dealing, but enforcement doesn't happen without the police department. I support the police. We need to have community policing. We need to work with the community. We have to enforce the laws that we have to prevent the dealing. Unfortunately, this is how it works. I've lived here for 17 years. I lived in the Richmond district, but the first couple of years I was here was in Nob Hill, and I come down often into the Tenderloin area. I'm familiar with the area here. We know what the problems are here. I know as your mayor, I will instill the three important core values of my candidacy, which are accountability, quality of life, and law and order. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, and it's really good to be home in the Tenderloin. And I do want to thank everyone for showing our city what an incredible neighborhood this is. This is one of the most compassionate, engaged, and active neighborhood that I've ever worked in. And I just want to thank you for all that you do every single day to make the Tenderloin healthier, safer, and stronger. And far from what people think, this is a neighborhood that likes our police officers. We work very closely with the Tenderloin Police Station, and there's a lot of initiatives that we've done over the last 7 years together to make this a safer neighborhood, but there's a lot more that we need to do. But community-led initiatives like getting rid of parking on the unit block of Turk and the 100 block of Eddy Street, to the $9 million that we invested in Bodecker Park to turn our only multi-use park from a drug haven and a prison into an amazing oasis used by our seniors, families, and children every single day, with dedicated funding to the Boys and Girls Club and the Y and our youth organizations to make sure we activate that park 7 days a week. There's a lot of work that we have to do to address public safety issues. It's partnering with our police officers, with safe passages, our volunteers that make sure every afternoon that our school children walk safely to home and their after-school programs, and investing in the social services that keep our neighborhood safer. That is how we're going to work to make the Tenderloin neighborhood safer every single day. And it's also going to be by knowing the names of the folks that you work with, whether it's your police officer or your legislative aides. Thank you very much.
For our next question, Amy, would you like to take it first? One of the most readily identifiable aspects of the Tenderloin is the proliferation of trash, drug paraphernalia, and human and animal excrement on our streets and sidewalks. Since last June, the Tenderloin CBD has collected on average more than 2,500 syringes and 30,000 pounds of trash per month. While the numbers are staggering, they don't always help us face the underlying root causes of our poor sidewalk conditions. So our question is, as mayor, what specific steps will you take, other than increasing resources for picking up trash, to make Tenderloin streets and sidewalks cleaner?
So San Francisco has invested $30 million in a move-along strategy. That move-along strategy is $8.7 million that's going into DPW and $20.6 million that's going into SFPD just to address encampments. If we were to take that $30 million, we could change it from investing in a move-along strategy to a you-belong strategy. And that you-belong strategy would be focused on making sure that we have safe, organized spaces for people to belong in community with reasonable agreements and responsibilities. And that's the work that I've been doing as the founder and director of the St. Francis Homelessness Challenge. I don't think throwing more money into DPW and SFPD is the solution. We need unarmed eyes on the street a nod to Jane Jacobs, who talked about how if we have people that are on the street supporting arts and culture, if we have people on the street that are supporting mental health, like Concern, do you know the group Concern that goes around the Tenderloin and addresses crisis issues? Like We City, do you know the people that are running the porta potties out of their own pocket next to the next door shelter? These are the kind of community integrated types of projects that we need to support with that money, not a move along strategy, but a you belong strategy.
Thank you.
Clean streets. The other day we went around and cleaned about 7 blocks of in Hayes Valley, and some of the unbelievable mess that we found, some of the dangerous. It is a sanitation health issue, and that's what's amazing to me, is that DPW doesn't understand this is hurting our people on the street. Now, I say this at different events, and I've said it from the very beginning of this mayor's race. With all due respects to the head of DPW, he needs to be replaced. We need a new person at the head of DPW who understands that cleaning this city is their priority. Going out there and keeping it clean is what they're supposed to be doing, and they could do it in a month. They could do it in a month from top to bottom. Are they doing it? No. What they're doing is putting out boulders to stop people from sleeping. What has that got to do with DPW? DPW's job is to take care of the cleanliness of the city and to do the department works, issues that have to do with water and with the infrastructure of the city. We need someone at the top that understands. And by the way, I don't believe that all the streets are dirty because we have homeless people. That is a ridiculous analogy to say it's dirty because of homeless people. It's dirty because a lot of people in San Francisco don't respect our city anymore, and they make it dirty, not the poor people who are living on our streets.
Last year, I introduced a resolution to propose a task force to study safe injection sites. People talk about it, but no one wanted to touch the issue because it was so controversial. And the sad reality is, we have to do something different. People are dying on our street from drug overdose. We see the needles everywhere. We see people shooting up all over the place. I know people who sadly struggle with addiction. They don't want to be out there shooting up in front of folks. And just imagine when someone is by themselves and they overdose. They often don't make it. The way that we address some of the challenges we know exist on our streets are safe injection sites. And I'm proposing that we do that, and actually last year, 30% of San Franciscans supported the idea of opening up a site. This year, a San Francisco Chamber of Commerce poll showed that 67% of San Franciscans actually support opening a site. We can't be afraid to try new, bold things. And I actually just got a grant for $500,000 to open up our first site. It's not just about money, it's not just about clean streets, it's about making sure people are being also held accountable for the conditions of our streets. Putting money in it, yes. Accountability is more important than making sure that we're out there doing the work that's necessary to clean up our streets, including safe injection sites.
So, safe injection sites, I don't entirely agree with. The reason, because we have to partner with clinics with addiction. We need to ensure that it's not going to be just simply a den for someone to shoot up. We need to be able to treat the people for their addiction. Addiction issues are a problem. And we're not going to be able to deal with any of the Tenderloin's issues by not dealing with the addiction problem related to shooting up.
I'd like to ask the audience to please allow the candidates to share their opinions with the crowd. We can't vote if we don't know what they actually think. We need to know what they think.
Well, I just wanted to to say the same thing. We are a generous community, and we accept a lot of different types of beliefs, and we really shouldn't shout down candidates when they state their beliefs. I do support a safe injection site. I think the question is in what neighborhood, and this neighborhood has accepted a lot of services, and I just want to thank this neighborhood for always saying yes to drop-in centers and shelters, but we need to make sure that these services are evenly distributed throughout San Francisco. It is not just the Tenderloin that is going to take care of all of the worst problems here in San Francisco. Now, street cleaning. This was a major issue when I ran in 2010, and I knocked on almost all of your doors. Thank you for opening it. And trash and feces was one of the top issues in this neighborhood, and I worked for several years with all of you to bring in the Tenderloin Pit Stops program, which we started in 2014. And I know you didn't want just another J.C. Decaux bathroom without a monitor, so we made sure that we created jobs by creating publicly monitored restrooms here in the neighborhood. And we saw a 60% decrease in steam cleaning requests after we just put in the first 3 pit stops in the neighborhood, and we have to expand that program. People need a place to go with dignity and respect, and you should not have to step over someone else's feces on your way to the park or to school or after school programs. We also need to double the number of street cleaners here in San Francisco. We have 285 street cleaners. Hong Kong has 6,000. And of the 285, only 150 are permanent full-time jobs. We should be expanding street cleaning. We absolutely need to do more of these services in our neighborhood and throughout the city.
Thank you.
Clearly, the status quo is not working. Whether we're talking about dirty streets or about drug sales on the streets, and to finish my answer from the first question, yes, drug dealing must be met with law enforcement because they're feeding the addiction of those who are struggling with an illness, and we've got to interrupt that connection. With regard to the mess on our streets, yes, we should be doing more, but if we don't address the real cause of the dirt on the street, which is the fact that we have human waste and refuse and the needles and the syringes, because 3,500 folks are living where they never should be living, which is on our streets and sidewalks. We need to provide homes for those folks, and we can do that. We can make use of those SRO units. We've got 1,000 people every night on a waiting list just to get into a shelter bed, a very unwelcome place where you can't bring your pet, your partner, your belongings, and still 1,000 people want to get off the streets. And if we can do that, there'll be a lot less human waste on the streets. And so that DPW doesn't have to spend $30 million a year cleaning up the sidewalks only to come back 2 days later and clean it up again. That's a waste of money. Let's reinvest it in housing people, and that will automatically make sure we have less waste on our streets. Thank you.
So, in a recent comparison of 170 of the most populated U.S. cities, using 40 key indicators of good health, San Francisco ranked #1 as the healthiest city in the U.S. But within the city, there are significant disparities in health outcomes, including life expectancy. The 33,000 residents of the Tenderloin live surrounded by affluence, but do not share in the city's rich opportunities. Location matters when it comes to health. 2 key chronic conditions we'd like to discuss tonight are mental illness and substance use disorders. So our question 3, which I'd like candidate Alioto to start, as mayor, what resources will you commit to support the long-term health needs of Tenderloin residents with mental illness?
Okay, and I didn't hear the beginning of your question because there was a buzz, but I'm just going to assume that it's about mental health illness, the needs of the city.
It's about applying resources to support the long-term health needs of Tenderloin residents.
Absolutely. First of all, as the president of the Board of Supervisors, I created the Mental Health Advisory Commission that did not exist in the 1990s, and I've advocated for years in Washington, D.C. and the state of California for mental health, because mental health has always been considered like a second class, sometimes not even existing. From 2004 to 2012, when I did the 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness, we housed over 11,000 people. But we didn't just house them in permanent supportive housing. The support is with health, with mental health aids, with all of the supportive part of it is totally medical. The bottom of all of our places that we were building had a is the essential key to housing our homeless people. So what I did during those 10 years was literally fight with Washington, D.C. in order to get the most funding the city and county of San Francisco has ever gotten for mental health, specifically of the elderly, for mental health of the homeless, and for mental health of our veterans. And we received more funding than ever. Now we have to work more with Sacramento to get more funding, because as a city and county, they don't give us what we deserve. They only give us what a county gets, as opposed to a city that's in a county. At any rate, I will fight like mad for funding for mental health.
Thank you.
You know, there are too many people suffering in our city with mental health challenges. And here's the problem. Everyone gets so sensitive when you talk about providing a guardian to someone who is struggling with mental illness. I introduced legislation that is going to hopefully change that, and I have an administrative fix as mayor that will treat this issue instead of a public safety related issue or a crime. We need to treat it like the public health issue it is. And so part of what I'm proposing is changing the mental health system so that we are able to provide a guardian for people who can't make decisions for themselves. We worked hard over the past year to open 54 new mental health stabilization beds at St. Mary's, partnering with Dignity Health and UCSF. They're still empty right now. There's still challenges going through the courts to get somebody conserved. We can't wait until someone is a harm to themselves or others. Just imagine if that were you out there, if that were your grandmother or your friend or your cousin or someone who you care about, who was out there in a place where they had suffered from schizophrenia, or they have their bipolar disorder or other challenges. They need help. They can't always make decisions for themselves. And we have to make aggressive changes in order to address the issue. Not to institutionalize anyone, but to get them healthy and to get them the support that they need.
Thank you.
I look at the mental health issue as a humanitarian emergency. I propose a 100-day plan. If I am elected mayor, within 100 days, I want to get all of those who are mentally ill off the streets into supportive care. How will we do that? My plan, for example, look at Pier 3032. This is just south of the Bay Bridge overpass. I want to take that open air area. I want to bring in FEMA-style emergency type mobile homes, line them all up, as many as can be reasonably fit, with services, with a clinic, with evaluations, with triage, and I want to bring those people there to be evaluated, and we can do that in an emergency manner. I will declare a state of emergency here in San Francisco. I will not wait for any other kind of supportive housing to be built. We don't know when that will ever come online. I want to handle this in an emergency manner. Thank you.
Thank you.
We as a city are not doing enough to address behavioral and mental health on our streets. Many of you asked me when I got on the Board of Supervisors to actually go through the shelter reservation system and spend a night at one of our homeless shelters, and I did. I stayed at Next Door, down the street on O'Farrell and Polk Street. And what I learned that night is that we don't provide any type of health services, even though people on our streets need it the most. So after that stay, I fought to get full-time nurses in every single one of our single adult homeless shelters in San Francisco. I worked to open a 24-hour medical shelter in the South of Market on Mission between 7th and 8th, which is staffed full-time with nurses, clinicians, and psychologists. We fought to get mental health support workers to join the homeless outreach team so that we have someone that can help triage people on our streets. And I worked to expand the Tom Waddell Clinic here on Golden Gate across the street, because we need to make sure that we're also expanding mental health and medical health services for everyone, including those that are housed. We need to increase our supported services in our buildings here, in this neighborhood, and throughout our city. And frankly, we're not doing enough to support the psychiatric needs, frankly, of those that are well-to-do either. We are not investing enough to address behavioral mental health. And finally, I worked with many of you to fight against rebuilding a jail here in San Francisco. And instead, We need to be pushing for a behavioral health justice system where we can help treat folks that interface with our criminal justice system and not just put them in jail, which is not going to help them heal.
In recent years, City Hall has failed us on mental health. We've seen dozens of beds closed at St. Luke's, mental health beds, the same at the Davies campus at CPMC. Even at San Francisco General Hospital, we've seen over a dozen mental health beds closed. And can you believe that in the new Sutter Hospital that's going up right now in Van Ness, there are no new mental health beds? And then we wonder why there are so many mental health issues on our streets. Currently, the largest mental health provider in the city and in the county is our county jail. That is wrong. We need to stop criminalizing mental health and start dealing with and treating mental health issues. And so, rather than have 50% of those in our county jail receiving mental health services, we do need a mental health justice center where folks, rather than be incarcerated, can be assessed and diagnosed and treated and have their mental health crisis stabilized. And then when they come out, rather than as currently, without any plan, any health plan or any caseworker, I brought home $1 million from the state specifically to build permanent supportive housing for those with mental health issues that could build up to 400 permanent and supportive housing units for those with mental health. We need to get them off the streets. They should not be left untreated, and then they need a home to stay well. Thank you.
Back in 1963, JFK actually promised that this would be a new era of community integrated mental health when they started to close the big state institutions. Guess what? That was never delivered, right? And so I actually have experience working in psychiatric hospitals, working in mental health and transitional work. I also have been working for the last 2.5 years as the director of the St. Francis Homelessness Challenge, so I've been working with people on the street. Anybody who's living on the street for one night or more is going to deal with trauma, right? Because if you don't have a safe place to be, if you don't have a place to go to the bathroom, if you can't sleep at night knowing that you're secure, you're going to suffer from PTSD. And so it's so important for us to create these safe, organized spaces where people can belong. I'm going to go back to this idea of the move along strategy needing to change to a you belong strategy, because with that $30 million that we currently spend just to respond to encampments with SFPD and DPW, we could be creating 60 hours of on-site support for every 20 people that's currently living on the street. We need unarmed programming that supports mental health and crisis de-escalation and gives people a safe space to belong, because that rootedness and belonging is something that's missing right now and that's leading to a lot of our issues.
Thank you. Question is in a slightly different format. It's a yes or no question, and we'd like candidates to raise your hand if you agree. The question is, will you support and fund safe consumption services, commonly referred to as safe injection sites, in San Francisco in 2018? Thank you. I just wanted to check for the record to make sure where you are on this issue. Housing is the single largest expense for a typical household. High housing costs relative to household income means fewer resources left for food, utilities, transportation, healthcare, and childcare. This push and pull can result in residents being forced to live in overcrowded housing conditions, accepting substandard housing, being displaced from their neighborhood, or becoming homeless. This is especially true in the Tenderloin, where many residents live on low or very low incomes. Since 2011, market rate housing in the Tenderloin has increased from 23% of the housing stock to 29% of the housing stock. 48% is rent stabilized, but vulnerable to gentrification. Only 5,400 housing units, or 23% of units, are permanently affordable. And we've got 2 more yes or no questions for the candidates tonight. The first one, please raise your hand for yes. The first one is, as mayor, will you commit to preserving single-room occupancy housing stock in the Tenderloin for extremely low-income households? So second is also a yes or no question. Please raise your hand if you agree. As mayor, will you commit to creating new step-up housing opportunities for Tenderloin residents? Thank you. So question 4, which I believe candidate Bree will start. The Tenderloin is divided between people who have dramatically different responses to the same problem. Everyone agrees that the neighborhood needs more low-income housing, but some in the Tenderloin think that new development causes the problem, while others believe new development is the solution. So the question is, as mayor, what will you do to unify these factions and advance an equitable, affordable housing agenda as gentrification and market demand continue to intensify?
You know what's interesting about what's happened in the city, specifically the Western Addition, you all know the story of redevelopment, the gentrification, and the fact that like the public housing, for example, that I grew up in, there were over 300 units, they were torn down, we were displaced, and they only built 200 units. When we think about what we need to do around this issue of this housing crisis all over the city, we have to make sure that we're building for all income levels and we're not leaving anyone out. It can't just be market rate. It can't just be low income. It has to be low, middle, moderate, all of the income levels that continue to get left out of the equation. And we have to build all throughout San Francisco. No one ever thought we would even build any additional housing in the Haight-Ashbury community. We just purchased the McDonald's site at Hayden's Canyon. We're going to build 100% affordable housing on that site. The police station in my district on Turk and Fillmore, a great opportunity in that huge parking lot to build more housing. We have got to do a better job with a long-term strategic plan around building more housing and building more housing for all income levels. I'm tired of losing my friends who are leaving San Francisco. We're watching as families flee San Francisco. We know the Tenderloin is actually one of the most affordable neighborhoods in the city. And if we don't protect the tenants who are here now, we're going to lose our very diverse population here as well.
So I have a rhetorical question. Why are we losing families? It's not just because of affordability. It's because when these new proposals come out for building however many units, for example, I've been at some of the hearings for Balboa Reservoir. I know this is the Tenderloin, but just as an example, the builders say we're going to build 1,100 units. They're not specifying if they are going to be micro units, if they're going to be 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. I will not permit, I will fight the builders if they only are going to build for single people. This is one of the reasons why families are leaving. Regardless of whether or not they are affordable, all different, low income, luxury, whatever the spectrum is, we also need to build 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom units. We also have to take into account that if there's families with children, that they're going to need a car. Why is that? Because for the families with the couples with kids who need to get their children to school, we have the lottery system, this great idea. A lottery system where someone over in the Richmond district may have to send their kids over across town. And so you need to have a car to do that. You can't use Muni. I'm not going to promote Uber or some other way to get there. And so this is why we need full range, A through Z, 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments.
Thank you.
Tenderloin is one of the more affordable neighborhoods in San Francisco because you fought to make it one of the most affordable neighborhoods in San Francisco. This community, over the last 30 years, has fought for this neighborhood, whether it is in preserving our single-room occupancy hotels, purchasing buildings, taking things off the speculative market, or fighting for more affordable housing, like the multi-family affordable housing we're building on Eddy and Taylor today, or like the affordable senior housing we built on Golden Gate just down the street. Or working with me and negotiating with developers to purchase 101 High, the former post office, to ensure that that would be 100% affordable housing, or working with my office to negotiate with another developer to purchase 180 Jones, the empty parking lot, which we are going to dedicate to be 100% step-up housing for single-room occupancy hotel residents today. We have to
build up more step-up housing. There's so many tenants here that have proven that they are a responsible tenant and don't need as much services. We need to step you up into studios and one-bedrooms throughout the city so we can reopen up your SRO hotels to people who are living in the streets today and need those services. So I am committed to working with this community to continue to fight for more 100% affordable housing here in the neighborhood, but also to ensure that we are fighting for step-up housing for you so we can free up existing housing stock to help address our homelessness crisis on our streets.
Thank you.
So my proposal is to create, build, and refurbish 5,000 low-income, middle-income, and supportive housing units each year. That's what San Francisco needs. Only 10% of San Franciscans can afford to purchase market-rate housing. Now we're going to build more market-rate housing as we get our inclusionary mandate out of that. And when I was on the Board of Supervisors, I authored the bill that mandates that a percentage of all new market rate must be below market rate. But right now that's about 19–20%. We've seen projects that get a public benefit, like Pier 70, can do 35 and 40%. So we should amend our inclusionary zoning ordinance for projects that fit the description of Pier 70 to not do 19 or 20%, but to do 35 and 40%, because we know it can be done, and put that into law. My first year in the Assembly, I had the opportunity to work with the Tenderloin Housing Clinic and Randy Shaw and many of the folks here in this room to protect the 13,000 low-income folks who are living in SROs by exempting them from the Ellis Act. So I always say step one is to keep those who have a home in their home, and then through inclusionary and also through small sites acquisitions, and we've got to find a unique and dedicated revenue source so we can take affordable housing, rent-controlled units off the speculative market.
We have the opportunity to do something different, which is demand 50% affordable housing when we provide upzoning to developers. But we can't do that currently because it doesn't pencil out in terms of being able to fund and finance the project. So one of the things that I've been talking about is we need new financing mechanisms of 0 to low interest loans where we can do public-private partnerships when we do upzoning so that the developers are financing the market rate part with the traditional bank, and then they're financing the affordable housing from very low income, which I currently am, by the way. I'm part of a low-income family, all the way up to 2 teachers or service workers living together at 120% AMI. Another thing that we need to be doing is that we need to invest in additional dwelling units, and that's something that London Breed has also been promoting as of late. That's something that we can do, and the reason why I promote additional dwelling units is that it costs about $200,000 per unit to build a new additional dwelling unit, as opposed to about $500,000 to $700,000. So we need to use that money very wisely. We also need to activate all these vacant units, right? And everybody's talking about a vacancy tax, but I have proposed a specific tax, which would be a parcel tax for all properties, and then there'd be exemptions if it's being leased or lived in.
Thank you.
You know, I haven't been in office for a couple of years. I'm a civil rights trial lawyer. So when I decided to run for mayor again, because of the amount of homeless people on our streets, the filthy streets, and the crime, I came into this situation with the complicated affordable housing. With all due respect, when I hear my esteemed colleagues here talk about 50% affordable, 100% affordable, who can afford affordable? What is affordable in San Francisco? I want San Francisco neighborhoods to be able to stay in their neighborhoods. So we need to make the housing in the neighborhoods affordable for the people who have lived in the neighborhoods. Not something that is unaffordable with the name affordable on it. Affordable is something like $130,000 a year. That's not what we're talking about. When I did homeless housing, formerly homeless housing, what what we did was mixed use. The first 4 floors would be formerly homeless, and it would be just paid with their SSI or their GI. Then the next 3 floors would be below affordable, and the next 3 floors would be affordable housing. Everybody living in the same place, in the same neighborhood, taking the same elevator, and getting to know each other in the community that has always been the soul of our city. So when I hear affordable housing 100%, I'm not sure who that includes. We need to do housing that addresses each neighborhood.
So the next question, which candidate Greenberg, please answer first, is, as mayor, what specific strategies will you use to make sure that stable, long-term housing is available for low-income residents and seniors in the Tenderloin?
Okay, so I am a big fan of all the work that's being done right now. I would support this. I would continue with allocating funds. The issue that was brought up before, though, is that if we have that many families that are here, we have to ensure that we have enough housing units to take care of our family here. We don't want them to leave. We want to ensure that there's transportation available for the elderly and disabled who need to get the treatment. We don't want people leaving the area. And that's what I would do. Just keep going.
Excellent, thank you. The question again is, what specific strategies will you use to make sure that stable, long-term housing is available for low-income residents and seniors in the Tenderloin?
So one of the most important things is site control, as you all know. And so it is about making sure that we can acquire land to dedicate it again for, and I know Angela questioned this, 100% affordable housing. So when we talk about 100% affordable housing, we need to make sure it's, and certainly for seniors, that it's for a broad range of incomes, from those that are only making Social Security, all the way up to, 55% of AMI, which is what we generally see here in this neighborhood. So when we acquire land, that we're dedicating it. So whether it's a site on on Golden Gate and Larkin, or the site that we just built with St. Anthony's on the corner of Golden Gate and Leavenworth, we can dedicate housing to low-income seniors in the long term that is subsidized so that seniors are not paying any more than 1/3 of their income. We also have to make sure that we're taking advantage of things like the Small Site Acquisition Fund. We're able to actually leverage that fund, for example, by 308 Turk Street, which was a building with a notorious slumlord landlord that had let their tenants and families live in squalor. We were able to buy that with a community land trust and keep it permanently affordable for those residents and tenants that live there, and we can do more of that with the multi-apartment buildings here in the Tenderloin neighborhood.
Thank you.
One of the very greatest risks of loss of housing for low-income and seniors in the Tenderloin and throughout the city is no-cause evictions. You're paying your rent on time, you're a good tenant, you're a good neighbor, and because of an Ellis Act eviction, you're out. And you're not going to have much luck finding another place. And so, though we were able to successfully amend the Ellis Act to protect SROs, traditional apartments are still at risk. And right now, there are speculators for whom the Ellis Act was not written. It was written for landlords who are illegally using that act to evict all tenants and then subdivide and make a quick profit. We need to take those speculators abusing the Ellis Act written for landlords to court and let them know there will be consequence for their evicting good tenants who are paying their rents. So we've got to protect those who are in homes from becoming homeless. Thank you.
I'll stand up for this one, why not? So, there's something that you can vote on this June that provides legal right to counsel when you get evicted. How many people are going to vote for that this June? That's a good thing. I also have a sheet right here that we can reform Costa-Hawkins, which is going to allow us to expand rent control. Come meet with me afterwards and sign this. I'd love for you to. The other thing we have to talk about is what caused the affordable housing crisis and the displacement crisis in San Francisco. After the global financial collapse of 2008, we went in the wrong direction. We gave corporate tax giveaways we supported the banks and we supported the developers at the expense of people. And so it's so important that we have to take a tighten from the top to bolster the base approach. The Coalition on Homelessness is doing that. We went from 35% to 21% reduction in tax at the federal level. The Coalition on Homelessness is proposing a new tax for this November that would actually take gross receipts from companies that make over $50 million a year, and it would put that into rental subsidies to keep people in their homes. It would give us $300 million a year to keep people in their homes and to create more supportive housing for people who are currently on the street. So let's take that tighten from the top to bolster the base approach. You like that? Tighten from the top to bolster the base. We need to make sure that we're making our corporations pay their fair share.
Going back to when we were housing the formerly homeless, we dedicated specific floors for the elderly. We made it a huge issue that the city would have to take care of the elderly when we were not doing it at all. As a matter of fact, there's a huge disrespect in the city and county of San Francisco for our elderly. So absolutely. So going back to the housing where you have dedicated housing for the elderly, dedicated housing for the gay community, dedicated housing for those who are formerly homeless or formerly mentally ill, is the type of housing that we need to bring in San Francisco, because when you've got billionaires coming into town with thousands and thousands of employees who are taking your apartments through the illegal Ellis Act, we have to do something innovative. We've got to come up with ideas where we're going to be able to keep our own people here and housed at a price that they can afford, and we've got to make it dedicated. We've got to let everybody know they've got to come to the table when they come to town. You know, the tax incentives that the tech company got boggles my mind, okay? That money could have gone to housing for everybody in this city. But having said that, it's exciting to have the tech companies in town. We all think it's great, but we have to sit down at the same table and negotiate, what are we going to do for our elderly? What are we going to do for our youth? What are we going to do for our schools? And what are we going to do for our homeless?
You know, it's really sad how we treated our senior community here in the city. As someone who was raised by my grandmother, I'm very sensitive about that, because especially during the time when they tore down the development we lived in and we were being displaced, my grandmother was aging, she developed dementia, and I gotta tell you, it was a stressful time for me and what I had to do to take care of her, and the frustration around the resources and what to do. So just imagine our seniors who don't have family, our seniors who are struggling with what to do to fill out the appropriate forms, and many sadly end up on our streets homeless. We have got to do a better job to address this issue. My Housing for All ballot measure that's on the ballot, Prop D, provides $10 million for the small sites acquisition program so that we can actually purchase buildings where seniors are located to protect and preserve their housing. My neighborhood preference legislation, which gives the people who live in this community priority to access new affordable housing that they qualify for, that legislation can help. When you look at what's happening specifically in District 6, more housing is being built in District 6 and District 10. How do we make sure that our senior community has the support they need to apply for that housing that they qualify for, so that they can have a place that is accessible and is affordable to their income? We have got to focus on making sure that the social workers who work with aging and adult services are also providing housing opportunities and support for our senior community as well.
Thank you. So thank you all for hanging in there. We have one more question for the candidates tonight. I'm going to change the topic a little bit. Residents of the Tenderloin face vast disparities in opportunities and resources compared with residents of other neighborhoods in the city. This is an issue of basic equity. The pathways out of poverty, homelessness, and poor health are often broken and almost impossible to navigate, especially for people with limited resources. Tenderloin residents have experienced decades of consistently high crime rates, dense living conditions, unsafe sidewalks, poor street lighting, widespread food insecurity, and lack of accessible cooking facilities. these issues have taken a disproportionate toll on Tenderloin residents' health and well-being relative to other San Franciscans. So our last question tonight is, as mayor, what 3 concrete steps will you take in your first year towards addressing these inequities and incentivizing city agencies to prioritize the needs of the Tenderloin? So our last question, Candidate Kim, please start.
So I am proud to have worked with so many of you on a number of the issues that we talked about today. We are currently installing brighter and new street lights through the negotiations that you actually sat at the table asking CPMC to fund with their new construction. I'm working to make sure that we are fully funding and investing in programs like Bodecker Park, safe passages, affordable housing, more medical healthcare services, and the Healthy Corner Store initiative, which you initiated here in the Tenderloin. We have 72 liquor stores here in the Tenderloin, and we don't have a single full-service grocery store. We need to make sure that our residents and families have access to fresh and healthy food, and I wasn't able to deliver a grocery store, and so instead you took it upon yourselves to work with the small business owners that were willing to be in the neighborhood and ask them to convert their model from a liquor store to a Healthy Corner Store, and we have successfully done that with 5 liquor stores here in the Tenderloin. We turned another one across the street, Big Boy Liquor Store, we all remember that place, into 826 Valencia, a reading center and site for our children and families. We shut down 4 liquor stores that were engaging in drug dealing and criminal activities in the neighborhood. This is how we work on making our neighborhood healthier, safer, and strong day by day, is with community-led initiatives where we are working from the ground up to make this a safer neighborhood for all of us. Now, in affordability, we also need to make sure that for residents like Brenda Washington in the back, when you get Section 8, that we are able to find you housing that you can afford in San Francisco. And we have to continue all of that work that we've built up over time. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Tenderloin feels overlooked because it is overlooked. Whether we're talking about parks or amenities of any sort, cleaner streets, the Tenderloin gets short-shifted. And it comes down to a budget process. And we need a mayor who's going to make sure that from the ground up, that inequity is attended to. And that is where the injustice can be identified. We're talking about economic injustice, environmental injustice, and social injustice. This can be addressed through the budget process. Additionally, with all of these tens of thousands of new jobs being created in the new tech sector and other business sectors, the understanding is that all these jobs are going to be filled from people coming from out of town. What about local hiring? Why don't we make sure that folks who are in San Francisco, who are underemployed and unemployed, get the necessary training? 50% of these new jobs are sales jobs. San Franciscans can do it. And that addresses the economic injustice right off the bat. And it also addresses the fact that if we hire locally, that new hire doesn't need a new housing unit. And that new hire doesn't need an expansion of Muni because he or she is already using Muni. So we address multiple issues by working with the industry, carrot or stick, mandate or otherwise, locally hiring.
As I mentioned in my first response, the issues that are facing the Tenderloin have been issues that have been facing the Tenderloin for decades, right? And so it's going to take nothing less than a revolution of love and logic in order to actually impact these things. And that means, like I said before, moving from a move along strategy to a you belong strategy, working with the people who are currently unsheltered in the Tenderloin and throughout the city, and making sure they have a place to belong in community with reasonable agreements and responsibilities on that pathway to healing and housing. That's one thing. Another thing is we need to not invest more in SFPD on the streets. We need to invest in unarmed programming that supports arts and culture, crisis de-escalation, mental health, and that network can work with the police when they are needed to be accessed, right? And then the third thing builds off of what Mark Leno Leno just talked about is we need to create those pipelines to prosperity. We need to make sure that people who are currently on the wrong track, involved in things that are harming themselves or others, have this pathway to job opportunities. And so we need people in San Francisco to be able to build and grow San Francisco and maintain San Francisco. I'm concerned about the Central Soma plan that has a 5-to-1 jobs to housing ratio. We need to create those links between public education and local jobs.
Thank you.
What's going to change the tenderloin of the three major issues in this campaign? And that is house our homeless in permanent supportive housing, clean the streets, and do something about full staffing of the San Francisco Police Department so that we can take care of the crime that is occurring. Those are the three issues in this campaign, and it hits this district more than any district in the whole city. But when I sit here and hear that this district has got one grocery store, and 70 liquor stores, why is that? Why you need a neighborhood mayor, and that'll be me. Because the concept, believe me, I'll get grocery stores in your neighborhood. First of all, I love to eat, I'm Italian. But having said that, the concept is, it's upsetting to me to hear there's only one grocery store in this neighborhood. Let me go back to something that Senator Leno just said. In the 1990s, 20 years ago, you all, 20 years ago, I did the LBE laws, the MBE, and the minority business laws. That means local hiring, and it was supposed to be 16% of the San Franciscans for the jobs. 20 years ago, it was supposed to be 16%. Today, it's 4%. Why is that? Why is that? You need a neighborhood mayor to make that percentage 16% like it's supposed to be by law, hire minorities, and hire local people from the city and county of our great city.
I'm running for mayor because I actually grew up in poverty in this city and know what it feels like to have to live with the neglect, to have to live with the violence, with the crime, with that, to have to live with the loss of friends and relatives and loved ones. I ran for the Board of Supervisors initially because I always felt that laws would get passed, housing would get built, things would happen all around me, and this stuff never connected to my community. It never connected to making the difference that people claimed it was supposed to make. When I am mayor of this city, nothing will be more important to me than making sure that what we do, whether it's the money we spend, whether it's the housing we build, nothing is more important to make sure than making sure that it connects to the people that we claim we're doing it for. We need to do a better job at addressing the crime in this community. But we also need to do a better job at holding our social service agencies accountable to provide the opportunities that we know so many residents in this community, if they knew about the opportunities, that they would jump at the chance. Holding our city accountable to provide more investments, making sure that when we build more housing, the residents of this community who need stable housing have access to that. I'm committed to doing what I can to work with this community to make sure that you are not neglected in City Hall.
So for years, the Tenderloin has been in the shadow of City Hall, figuratively and realistically. The Tenderloin has been shit on for years, and this has got to stop. Why is this happening? A lack of accountability by all departments of the city and social services, nonprofits that are providing homelessness outreach. They're all not accountable. Money is being spent. Hundreds of millions of dollars is going from city to organizations, and money is not being accounted for. Where has it gone? This has to stop. I will install, as your next mayor, a mechanism in order to be able to check with goals and with a checklist, for example, of performance goals, what needs to be done in order to be able to keep working with us. If not, if the homeless outreach organizations, if the different department heads PUC, all the different departments. If they do not want to go along, then their department heads will be pulled. If it's a nonprofit organization, we will stop doing work with them. So this is what I will do as your next mayor. Install accountability, law and order, and uplift our quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That comes to the end of our questions for the evening. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I'd like to thank the candidates for spending so much of their time with us this evening. It's been an honor for me personally to moderate the forum, and I really appreciate all of you for your time and graciousness with each other and with the audience. I want to take a moment also to thank our host, St. Boniface, for the generous gift of the space. It's really beautiful and it's been great to be out here. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the organizing committee who put this all together. They worked tirelessly for months and months. If you're here, please raise your hands so we can acknowledge you and give you a little bit of love. Thank you so much. Have a great night.